Hi, welcome back to the Trial by Jennifer podcast. My name is Jennifer Butterfield. I am your host, and I am very excited to welcome today's guest, a personal friend of mine who I can talk hours and hours and hours with, but we're going to try to keep it to just 1 hour today, Danielle Cobb. And welcome, Danielle. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey Jennifer, I am so excited to be on here. I have thoroughly enjoyed watching you just like blossom into this new thing, and honestly, I've learned a lot. So thank you. And I'm over here on the sidelines cheering for you, girl. Um, Congratulations! It's exciting. Um, let's see, where do I begin? I'm 33. I have been sober for 8 years. A huge part of my life I spent overweight, and so a lot of what we're going to talk about is health focused and kind of my journey coming home to myself.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and all the trial and error and insecurities and all of the things in between. So I'm excited to be with you guys today.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm excited because I feel like you and I have always had like a very parallel experience in almost like every area of life, like the health and fitness journey, and then like just growing as human beings, like even like parallels with relationships. Like there was a period where I felt like we were just running in tandem to one another, and it was so relatable and so I almost feel like I'm looking into a mirror when I'm talking to you. And so yeah, this is going to be a great episode. And I'm really grateful that you were able to make time to come and talk to me about all these things. And I ask all of my guests on the podcast this question. And so I'm going to ask it to you. And what was like, in your home growing up, and feel free to share as little or as much about this as you'd like, but what was the conversation around personal finance like for you and your family and as a kid and into adulthood?
This is a really great question. I met with somebody who's a friend of mine in a similar field as you, to kind of talk about budget and talk about how do I get into a better place financially. And
Mhm.
one of the questions she asked me was, what was it like growing up? What were the values for your mom and dad around money?
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I had really like thought about it, and I was like, you know what? My mom had this mentality of, we would go shopping, and she would go to the door when we got home to see where my dad was, and we snuck everything in, right? So it was like this. I learned that when you buy things, you have to you have to hide it, right? It's not this thing that's bad, right? If you do it, it's got to be secretive. So that was like one part of it, right? And
Hmm.
then when I was thinking about my dad, I was like, oh, and he was a very frugal man. He's the kind of guy I grew up in a blue collar family, right? My dad made decent money. He's worked for American Airlines for 35 plus years, and like he is the kind of guy who I promise you has accounts nobody knows about and probably has a lot more money than you would think, right? And
Yeah.
so it was always with him like, well, we don't need to spend that. We don't need to spend that, like turn off all the lights, turn the
Right.
air on, right? Like so it was very opposite messages, completely opposing messages. So
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
was really interesting to like come to, well, what are your values around money? And I can get into that later if it comes up, but like it was interesting to kind of question and be curious about that.
Totally. It's interesting because I have a couple of people that are in my life too, where it's like, they will hide stuff to this day, when they go and spend things. And it's like, I don't, yeah, I mean, I like, thank you for giving us the picture, like painting the picture, because I think too, like, that dynamic is probably present in a lot of like familial units, like where mom likes to spend money, dad's got the money but like likes to keep a tight wallet. And I mean, yeah, I am curious to hear more about like how that's impacted you, and I'm sure it'll come up throughout this conversation. But yeah, I don't think that's uncommon at all, and I love the way you described it too, because I came from a like there was no male figure in my life growing up. And so my mom was like both of those things in a lot of ways. Like sometimes we would go shopping. There wasn't any hiding it, but like, we would go and spend a bunch of money at like Limited Two. Do you remember Limited Two?
Yeah.
And like I remember really wanting to go into like Abercrombie and Fitch, but like we couldn't afford it. And then like other times it was like, no, we can't afford that at all. And so it was like just both of those elements in one person. But yeah, I would say I've heard a lot of experiences that are similar in nature to that. And
Mhm.
switching to like your health journey, because I feel like personal finance impacts every area of life, and it permeates all parts of our being. And so, can you tell us a little bit about some of like the key health goals that you have set for yourself and achieved throughout this journey that you've been on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up, my first vice as a kid was food, right? And it was my way to escape reality, to feel okay, to fill this hole and this void. Home was chaos, really uncomfortable, and so that was kind of the thing that like soothed me. The thing that I like as a kid like looked forward to. And growing up, like my family, they didn't have any sense of like health and wellness. Like I look at other families today that are like fresh vegetables and girl, when I tell you I didn't know that green beans were bright green until I was an adult, I because we ate them out of a can. I had no idea. I'm like, wait, why are these green beans so bright?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's happening? So like
Mm-hmm.
canned food, boxed dinners, like lots of sugar, all of these things were just the norm in my home. Coke was like, that's what you drank with every meal. And so I had zero sense of like health and nutrition and this idea that food is nourishing your body, right? That it not only nourishes you mentally, physically, but also spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
Our gut is our they say is our second brain, and some people argue it's our first brain, and I believe that. And so like over time, I spent a lot of my life overweight, obese, and in a lot of shame. And like when I got sober, and I'm just going to be really vulnerable because that's who I am. But when I got sober, it was like it illuminated a lot of my issues, right? Like eating disorder, like disordered eating, really, just a really unhealthy relationship with food. And so over time, I replaced using substances with like, using food once again, right? And so I just got to this point where I was living in so much like self hate and disappointment and like watching all of these people who took care of themselves and
Yeah.
as an act of self love and just like they looked better, they looked happy, and I knew that that was a component of it, right?
Right.
And a lot of it too was like hiding these parts of myself, right? Like I was so afraid to talk about these core issues. I
Yeah.
could tell you I was a recovering addict, right? Like no big deal, but to tell you that I had issues around food, like I struggled to open up about that. And so once it got to a point, like the old I'm sick and tired being sick and tired, right? Literally. I started to look a little bit deeper. And part of that was getting honest with the people in my life about what that really looked like behind closed doors,
Yeah.
um, and having to get really vulnerable and like trust that these people in my space were going to love me no matter what. But this
Mm-hmm.
is something that had to be done, if I wanted to be free. And so I spent years doing the yo-yo, like crash
Mm-hmm.
dieting and going to the gym and going really really hard and then falling off and then saying screw everything, right? This is too
Yeah.
hard, so I would quit it all. And I did that over and over and over again, and that felt really defeating, but again still had this like punishing mentality around all of it. And so I I, at some point, along the way was like, okay, I have to shift my mindset. This was probably like 4 years ago. And I was like, I have to shift my mindset. The way that I view this isn't working, right? This is a very punishing approach to health and wellness. And how is that going to be helpful, And so I shifted my perspective to, this is okay. So you've acknowledged that these people do this because they love themselves. So what does that look like for you, right? Punishing, we don't punish people we love, right? And so punishing myself is not a way to love myself. And it just clicked for me one day. I was like, I want to show up for myself. When I say I'm going to show up for myself, I'm going to put good food in my body, and have balance in that area, because I love myself. Right. And I started to act, and I didn't actually love myself, but I wanted so deeply to. And so I acted my way into that, and it took the pressure off of, like, you have to look this way in order to be lovable.
Right.
It was
Right.
like, no, I'm doing these things because I love myself, and the results will come. um so that's kind of what that, the biggest goal for me was shifting my mindset into, like, instead of like, do this because you have to, and this is what healthy people do, and if you don't, then you're, a POS, right? More like, I love you, and I'm going to love every phase of what this looks like for you.
Totally. Totally. Oh, and like, I feel like when people, I don't know, like if they were to like see the title of this podcast and tune in, like I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, what's the secret, right? And it's like, I feel like that takes people by surprise, because it really, I mean, just the progress that you've made, and I don't mean like on a physical level, yeah, that's impressive, but like the groundedness that you come from over time, like it has just been so anchored in like your own truth, and like it's visible inside and out, and like just the joy that you radiate, and you can tell that like you're nourishing your body with good thoughts, like good food, good exercise, and I mean, it's like contagious, it's inspiring to people. And I mean, I'm so proud of you, and I relate so much because I have yo-yoed with my own weight like 3 times in my adult life, and I also grew up where I remember like wanting to be skinny, like skinny, and I shouldn't, let me rephrase this. I wanted to look like other girls, and I don't think that my body will ever look like another person's body, and it doesn't matter whose body we're talking about. Like, we are all uniquely created, and I believe in God's eyes and his world, but like I remember having the realization when my mom bought me like a Cosmopolitan magazine off the HEB like magazine stand, and I remember saying, "Oh, I want to look like Reese Witherspoon, like her legs, like she was in a mini skirt or something." And I think like my mom broke it to me. She's like, "I don't think like your legs are ever going to look like that, Jennifer." And it was like devastating to me. But what I think I realized, and I mean, I appreciated my mom's honesty in that sense. And I also look back on how she nurtured me, and like my self image in a lot of ways was really healthy. But I I look back on that, and I wonder like what would it have looked like to, I don't know, like have a realistic picture of what I can feel like today, and how that might be a reflective image of what I am physically, but also like that comes from an internal dialogue of loving self, and like I've been on a fitness journey. I've been going to Orange Theory
Yeah.
like 4 times a week, and like that's a whole different conversation because it's an expensive membership, but I'm getting my money's worth, and I feel so good when I'm doing it. And as a result, yeah, it's been that thing where it's like I'm not thinking about um, the results so much, but the results come, and that's like a bonus. But it's like the mental health is a huge thing. And like feeling confident in my own skin, my posture, being able to walk in a way that feels like I'm able to conquer the world. So I just want to say thank you for sharing so vulnerably because it unpacks this part of ourselves, and this is a safe space, but like to open up about things like this, it takes a lot of courage. And I really appreciate you coming to talk about this because I think a lot of people have that internal dialogue, and they suffer alone,
Mm, for sure. I definitely did for a long time.
Yeah. Um, I one of the things that caught my eye and like gave me the spark to think to have you as a guest on the podcast was not just like your health and wellness journey, but there was this one TikTok video that popped up on my feed, and you were like, come meal prep with me. And I remember it was like a southwestern salad or something, and it looked delicious. I was like, oh my gosh, she's making this so easy, and like she's also doing a great job of creating content. So I'm curious, like, because I have a lot of people that I work with on a regular basis that, they go through this thing of like, oh, I can't create the time to do this thing or whatever. And so it can feel overwhelming meal prepping. Like, what advice do you have for these people, especially like somebody who's like a working mom or somebody who's just starting their meal prep journey, or anybody that is new to that concept or wanting to start again?
Yeah. So there's a couple parts to this. Like the first part is I think it's really important to, and this is in line with like kind of your financial like theme, right? Like what you do. I think it's really important to understand what your values are around money, because if my values are, that I want to spend money on health, on my health, right, and food being a part of that, then I budget accordingly, right? And for me, buying quality ingredients is something that's a important value of mine. However, I've also been on this journey as a woman who didn't have any, business spending money on quality food, and I didn't, right? But I didn't buy the organic. I did, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Like it really is. Like I spent years eating that way. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just my values have changed really because of gut issues and other things. But um so the I think to answer your question, I am lazy. I do not like to spend time in the kitchen doing that stuff. So I was like, okay, if I do this, I need it to be fast. And so that was kind of my mentality, was like, all right, I'd get these, I'd look up like easy meal prep ideas. And that was something I put in one of my videos before. That was my inspiration, was like, okay, how can I make this as easy as possible? Right. And some people want to go all out and have these extravagant meals. Like I eat to nourish my body. I'm the girl who can eat the same thing multiple times a week. I just am. Some people aren't, and that's okay too, right? And I can talk about ways around that. But so I was like, all right, we're going to pick two meal ideas. I'm going to, one of them is going to be something I can make in a pan, right? And so that was the Southwestern thing I did, was pick a protein, pick a carb, pick a couple of vegetables, and throw it in a pan, And while that's going, right, I have an air fryer. I think that they're a game changer. You can get an air fryer for $30, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so picking another protein, whether that's like a fish or chicken or whatever, like having that going while I'm doing this other thing, and then even throwing vegetables in the same air fryer thing, like and just putting it in meal prep things. Like we just overcomplicate everything, and I had a lot of fear around meal prepping too. And I was also the girl that was like, I don't have time, I don't have the money. But in all reality, like when you go out to eat, and even going through a fast food place, you're spending $8 to $10 for
Mm-hmm.
fast food. You're going out to eat, you're spending at least $20 to tip somebody in for your meal, at least, right? And so and when I break down my meal prep, it's like I go to the grocery store, and on just the meal part alone, I'm spending, I don't know, $100 for a full week of eating. You know what I mean? Like, and you can get it cheaper than that too, no problem. But so it really is like this, I think, this loop that a lot of us stay in, so that we don't have to do it. you
Mm-hmm.
know where it's like, I don't have time, I don't want to do this because I don't want to have to like, because then I'm gonna have to do some work. You know what I mean? Then I'm gonna have to actually do something, and it's easier to say, no, I can't do that. I don't have time. You know.
Totally.
So yeah,
Well, I mean, this is kind of going off script of, some of the questions I had sent over, but, just hearing your response to the previous question, and I'm curious, like, how does the like intention with meal prepping, I mean, even the fast and easy way, like, how do you think that plays into this idea of shifting the paradigm to the self-love? Like, do you find that to be an act of self-love in doing your meal prep, or like what are some of the benefits that you experience from doing that versus like going to eat out or like going to fast food restaurants or whatever?
100%. I mean, absolutely, it's an act of self love, and like just like going to the gym. Like one of the commitments I made to myself those 4 years ago was like, if you say that you're going to go to the gym that day, you're walking into that gym even if you're going for 10 minutes, but you're going through the door and you're going to hop on the treadmill for, you know what I mean? And it was just like, if I say it, I'm going to do it, right? And so the same mentality with cooking, and I think the biggest motivator was we don't know what they're putting in our food when we go out to eat.
Right.
People cook with seed oils, which are terrible for your gut, you know, and someone who has struggled with gut issues, like that was a big part of why I was like, oh, this is not, I almost have to cook for myself most of the time. Like, listen, I go out and I enjoy myself and I don't beat myself up for that sometimes, and I'll suffer the consequences of feeling discomfort or whatever to enjoy my life too. But really, it was like I feel terrible, so I want
Yeah.
to know what's in my food. I want to know all the ingredients that are being put into the food that I eat, right? And the only way for me to really do that is to cook it myself. So
Hmm. No, absolutely. And I think you bring up a really interesting point because I'm in the middle of writing a blog about like organic versus non-organic, and like is and like the way that health food packaging and marketing sells to a certain type of consumer and how it's become really trendy. And it's like I remember dating this guy, and we went to the grocery store together a lot, and he was like one of the most frugal people I've ever met. And like there would be opportunities to compare products, right? One was like name brand, like fancy packaging or whatever. And then one was like probably not fancy at all, like Hill Country Fare, even. And like just looking on the back, the ingredients were the exact same, like caloric content was similar, like even sugar and all of those things that, like, I think there's like this misconception. It comes down to like reading the label. And so it's like I just think that's so interesting because I think a lot of that ties into this like consumerism ideal of like, oh, you have to buy like $5 whatever organic. And I mean, for some products, like, yeah, it does make sense to purchase those, but like not everything necessarily.
no, you're absolutely right. And honestly, it's interesting because I didn't even start reading labels until I was like really suffering with my gut issues.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to bring some awareness around to some of the things that I eat because I started to, you know, I knew that fake sugars were a huge problem for me, sucrose and, you know, like
Syrup.
Splenda, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Um, that I ingested a lot of, right? Because I'm like trying to cut calories, but it was actually hurting me in the long run, even in my pre workout and my protein powder and like all of these things, right? And so I started to read labels and I was shocked. I was like blown away that they put, you know, everybody thinks that oat milk and almond milk and all of these things are like the better alternative, but there's seed oils in them, like literally canola oil in your milk. Like disgusting, you know? And I
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, this is so mind blowing to me. Like all of these things that you're talking about, these like that have nice packaging and good, it's totally the consumer market, you know, blindsiding us, right? Like this looks healthier and it's more expensive, but really it's actually tearing your gut apart. It's not
Yeah.
healthier. And to be honest, I've questioned whether or not organic fruit is actually organic fruit. you know?
Well, and that's what I'm doing research about right now. And I think, by the time this episode airs, the blog will be published. But I'm looking at some of these different like medical opinions on, and yeah, like they're saying, like from what I'm reading, the pesticides that are used, there's less of a trace of them with organic foods, but nutritionally, the value of organic versus conventional is not that much different, not even worth noting. And so
Interesting.
that's fascinating. But I also think too, like there are certain types of food that have like, thin skins, like apples is one, and like broccoli and like blueberries, things like that. But things like bananas and avocados that have a thicker skin and peel, it's like no harm in going conventional there apparently. And I think too, like a lot of people get caught up in this thing, well, oh, I'm it's an investment in my health, which is true. Like yes, medical bills will become much lower over time and all of these things, but I think it can be another trap of consumerism, of just buying into the thing that says organic, that looks organic, but again, it's really coming down to turning it over and reading the label, and like figuring out what works for each body.
100%. And that's the thing is, man, this is a journey for me because
Yeah.
uh, gut health is there is not a black and white, this is the right way, this is what's going to fix your gut. Like everybody's so different, everybody's allergens are different, everybody's the way that they digest things are different, and so it is quite the journey. And honestly, it requires a lot of patience because it doesn't happen overnight. But yeah, read the labels. It's a major thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say like I'm assuming it would be a lot of trial and error, right? Like and knowing for my own too, but like as far as just looking into your routine like with meal prep and like walk me like do you do it on Sundays? Like take like hold my hand and walk me through your meal prep routine, do you clean as you go? I know you mentioned the skillet. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does it look like with juggling everything else that's on your plate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is where it's for all those people out there who have busy lives, like my weeks look different all the time, right? And ideally, I like to do it on Sunday, right? Where Sunday's kind of my get my life together. But right now, I have a commitment where every Sunday, and so I'm kind of having to adjust. But that's what it looks like sometimes. Is like, okay, I don't have time this weekend, so I'm going to do it on Monday, and that kind of sucks, but we're going to get it done. So ideally on the weekend, right? And I go to the grocery store, and I'm one of those, I love the grocery store. I don't know why. I just like, it's like a therapeutic thing for me. I get really excited. And I make a list. I think that's really important. And I always like, I never understood how the value of a list until you're an adult who lives on their own and doesn't have endless amounts of money to blow, right? But
Mhm.
not being hungry is another a good point too, like going to the grocery store. But having my ideas, my meal plans already in my head, right? So I go to the store, pick out all my ingredients. I kind of joke about this, but I do think that there's some truth to this. I am ADD, and the way that I do things is like I start something and then I go start something else and then I go start something else and then it all comes together, right? So like quick meal prepping for me is like perfect for someone who has ADD because I get something going. While this thing is cooking, I'm like, oh, I have an opportunity to clean this one thing. Okay, cool. I'm gonna unload the dishwasher. Oh, I'm putting and I do it all like really fast, and I don't overthink it. I just do, it's kind of just a flow for me. And some people might watch me and be like, you're insane, but I get it done. And like, so playing music is fun, right? I make it a whole experience, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, you know, this is my time. I'm setting aside at least 45 minutes to get this done. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? Like I just get up in the morning and I don't give myself time to think about whether or not I want to go. I'm just going, you know? So,
Totally, totally. Well, and a couple things that come to mind too, it's like, um, I know like certain people have like pretty limited resources like in their work environment, like what like if there wasn't like hopefully there's access to a fridge, right? But like if there's not a microwave or like a sink with a disposal and stuff, like have you found any like cool workarounds with stuff like that? I mean, I know like a lunchbox with a cooler would be a good one. I'm just trying to think like raw foods, I guess, would be like some solutions there. I'm just like, because there are certain elements where I'm like, I feel like people can have a tough time when it comes to like lunches and meal prep and stuff. And so, have you ever run into anything like that? And like, do you have any solutions off the top of your head for those things?
I mean, fortunately, I work in an environment that has a kitchen. But if I didn't, I mean, I would, and I didn't have a microwave. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm just gonna I'm gonna keep something out of the fridge all day. By the time lunch rolls around, it's room temperature and we can eat it. You know, I'm
Yeah.
pretty simple. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Like I'm not the girl who's got to have her food hot, you know. Like I said, like I think my mentality around food is like I'm just for nutritional value, you know.
Yeah, totally. Totally,
So,
totally, totally. I love it.
good
As
question.
we were talking about this, like I was remembering, you're talking about the gut, and the biomes and the health. They say there's like more neurons in our gut than our brain and like anywhere else in the body. So it's almost like there's like this innate intelligence that comes from having a healthy and balanced gut. And so I was thinking about that like as we were talking, because I mean, that just reinforces this idea of like how important it is to eat well and to value the nutrition. And yeah, I just love that I love that you mentioned that, because I think too, you see a lot of people that like have illness, have disease, and like, I'm not saying like major thing, like, this is not medical advice by any means, but like, I do think that a lot of times, like, that's where a lot of these health complications can start. I know that when my pH and gut has been having issues, it affects every area of my life. Like I'm
Yeah.
chronically fatigued and all kinds of stuff, acid reflux and all of that. Uh,
Depression. I mean, listen, when my gut has been really thrown off or I've like had a bad few days of eating or whatever, like that I mean, really mentally I'm not well. You know, like
yeah,
it can get pretty dark for me. So that's another like just point of contingence or like importance for me is like if my gut has that many more neurons than my brain, right? Like and then imagine how much more clearly I think, how much more connected I am when I'm eating things that are nourishing my body. Like for me it was like just how this whole experience of having a healthy gut will just elevate me in all areas of my life. You know, it's not about how I look, right? Like I got a 15 pounds on me that I'm like may or may not ever go away and I'm okay with that, right? But I want to feel good, you know.
so I'm curious too, like with your gut healing journey, like what are some foods that have worked for you where you feel like satiated, you feel like it sits well, like there is not, and like what are some foods that are like a no for you, or like it's a red flag, like I know that this could cause discomfort, because I think this is an important part of this conversation too, because so many people do like have chronic stress, and as a result like that impacts their gut, and I think it's like this continuous wheel, right? Like don't have time to cook, get fast food, eat fast food, feel bad, and then keep the cycle going, and so I'm curious like what's worked for you.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, like this sounds so cliche, but the Whole Foods. I mean, really, truly, like me and one of my best friends just did Whole 30, and it
Okay.
was for any other reason except we wanted to like cleanse our like we were eating too much sugar, and we were like, let's just do Whole30 and kind of like get a cleanse start, you know. And
Mhm.
I will tell you that I have never felt better in my life just eating whole foods. And we didn't get crazy with it where like Whole Foods or Whole30, you're like not supposed to just eat fruit on its own, and
Okay.
not supposed to like mix things. So we were basically eating like a really strict paleo diet.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it was like everything's regular, like I have so much energy, and you know, I've all of these different things like eating for your blood type. This is something that I've been really curious about
Mm.
too, is like there is no data behind eating for your blood type, and when I was doing the research it said people feel better eating for their blood type because they're eating more whole foods. And that's just it, you know, like staying away from processed foods is a big thing for me. I eat it, I do it sometimes, right? But I just have to know like you may or may not feel well after this, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, eating whole foods, keeping it pretty simple. Like for me, doing ground turkey or ground beef is like a staple, and it's pretty cheap, you know. Just make a whole bunch of that, some veggies, and just like throw it together, you know? Throw some hot sauce on it, whatever.
Yeah,
It's
spices, right? Like salt, pepper, whatever. Yeah, I actually have some ground beef thawing right now in my sink, but it's a staple for me too. And like, I love like healthy fats like avocado. I was dealing with some gut issues recently, and I was like, maybe it's the acidity in the coffee that I've been drinking. And so
Mhm.
I like cut coffee for a little while, switched to matcha, and then my old roommate had come over and she made me this like breakfast board, and it had like two hard boiled eggs and a peach that was cut up and a banana that was cut up, and it had cinnamon and honey on it, and it was like so simple, right? But I mean it was delicious. And
Mhm.
I will say that like my gut health improved so much, and all of those things are like whole foods, you know. And
Mhm.
it's so simple, and it's interesting how our society has kind of like gotten away from the simplicity of those things, and it's like, oh, I don't know what it is about certain things. Like I've noticed at times I just like won't feel content, like it doesn't feel like it's enough, or like it's like, oh, can it really be this easy or like this simple, you know? It's like there has to be more. It needs to be this extravagant like gourmet meal or something, but it's like no, like that's the key, you know, is keeping it just pared down to something that's manageable.
Well, and doing Whole30 was really cool because your cravings really do go away. Your cravings for processed food and for sugar, and like it all sounds so cliche. I got to plug in my computer. But it's true. Like I started to crave like, oh, I can't wait to eat this like banana and almond butter, you know, like
Yeah,
and for someone who loves sorry guys. For someone who loves sweets, like that's a huge thing for me. Nut butters are great, cacao nibs, goji berries, dark chocolate, like the brand Who, I think that's how you say it, HU.
yeah,
The best dark chocolate, the best like sweet treats like that, and they're all like paleo. So
I love
just
that.
for the sweet eaters out there, it's
Yeah, like
reachable.
nature's treat, right? I love it. Okay, so I'm curious to like, so there are obviously people that have fitness goals, maybe that haven't been able to really reach them, right? But they have them and they really want to get like a tangible grasp on them and make them reality. And maybe they can't afford like a fancy gym like Orange Theory or like organic brand foods to reach these long-term financial goals they've set for themselves. What would you recommend like in terms of fitness? And we talked a little bit about food products and stuff, but I'm curious like how do you make that affordable like with working out, and what's your routine with that that's been effective for you?
Yeah, great question. So my journey has definitely developed. I think the main thing is like make, you said it, tangible, making tangible goals, right? So starting realistically, like you're not going to be the person who's like meal prepping all the time and going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week overnight. That is not realistic. I don't care who you are, you know? I don't care if you were an athlete in college, you know what I mean? If you've been off the wagon for a long time, it's going to take small, tangible goals. And so the beginning of my journey looks like I went for walks every day. And those walks started with half a mile, then they went to a mile. Then some days I would walk 5 miles, right? And those were my heavy workout days, right? Um, and I said, but my commitment to myself was, okay, I'm going to make one of these things consistent and the other will follow. For some people, it's nutrition. For me, it was working out because I was like, well, I'm putting all this effort and energy into this one area. Like, I don't want it to be go to waste, right? My mind kind of works backwards. For some people, it's like, let's get the nutrition under control and then work out. I'm backwards with everything. So for me, it was like, putting all this effort into this, I want it to be worth it. So once I started to make that a routine, then it was like, okay, I'm going to start adding in more healthy things. I'm not going to cut everything out at one time either, right?
Yeah.
So just slowly incorporating more nutrient dense foods, and then slowly starting to cut out more processed things and maybe fast food. And if you drink soda, like soda, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then you find your groove, right? You find what works for you. It sounds like Orange Theory when someone's telling you what to do is like, that's how you get motivated. A
Yeah.
lot of people are like that, right? I was somebody who loved the journey of learning, strength training and learning all of it on my own and kind of like watching influencers and being like, oh, I'm going to try that exercise and finding my confidence in my way around the gym. That worked for me. And I worked out at Planet Fitness for $10 a month for a long time.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's a gym, um, and then eventually I was like, I'm gonna upgrade. I'm gonna go with Gold's Gym, and I pay 45 a month for that. So it's still very manageable.
That's definitely very affordable. And I know too, like the YMCA has really affordable options. I think it's like on a sliding scale. And also, yeah, I mean, I've definitely like the walk thing, super good for mental health. Like there's so many benefits to walking, but just like getting out there and especially, I mean, like I looked at the temperature, it was like 91 degrees at noon today. So that was exciting. I don't know. It might actually cool off. I'm not sure. I think it's probably 100 degrees right now. But I think if you're in Texas, like hopefully the weather will continue to get a little bit nicer, as the season carries on and, walks are going to feel really good outside. But yeah, all that's really, really valuable. And I think too, yeah, it doesn't have to be that. Like I was a member of Core Power Yoga for a while and I was going a lot, but again, very expensive, And so it's like how to find these little workarounds. I've also been a member at Planet Fitness and like your girl hit up the tanning bed like nobody's
Girl,
business. Like every
girl.
24 hours could not come soon enough.
Yeah. Two gym memberships for a minute so I could have a cheap tanning membership. Don't
Oh
get
my
it
gosh, you were so funny. Yeah,
$10 a month versus $100 a month at Palm Beach. Shit.
yeah, you're right. Oh my gosh, great, smart. That's
Little
very.
hack.
So I'm curious, I love that you again, here's another parallel, like your influencer space, being,
Yeah.
on TikTok and sharing this journey openly. How do you think these videos have kind of helped you connect with an audience in comparison to like other platforms? And like what have you seen like in terms of benefit in the viewers that watch? Like what impact is that having in their lives or something tangible that you can see, like sharing this information, like, yeah, can you talk about your experience with that?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it made me reflect on like this journey. It's been so personal, but I've made it so like intimate with like I don't know whoever's willing to listen. Like I don't. For me, it started as this outlet of when I would be feeling really insecure. Like if I was having really insecure days, right? I started to just like put it out there, and I would post something really vulnerable and the way that people responded, you know, women would message me on the side and be like, you have no idea how much this helps me. Like, you have no idea how much I relate to this. Like, I cried when I read this because I feel the same way. And so that just was like, oh man, like this is why we share vulnerably. This is why we like put ourselves out there. And so that level of bravery just like became just this outlet for me, you know. And I, because I too would watch people who, I mean, my biggest influencers were people who were really overweight and found their way back to themselves and lost all this weight. And like those were the people that motivated me. Like,
Yeah.
not the people who had the NASM certification and the, you know, like all of these who were an athlete their whole life. And like, I'm not saying any, that's great, right? That's great that somebody found that early on. Like, but for someone like me, I wanted something relatable. And so putting out content like that is important because just like we learn in our fellowship, like we don't get to hold on to this stuff, right? Like this is my journey for a reason. It's my journey to be shared. And so for me to keep that selfishly is selfish, you know. But in regards to TikTok and all that stuff, it's like it's fun. It's fun, and I'm the girl. I don't watch TV. Like
I
again,
neither.
I have ADD, and so like short little things for me keep my attention long enough, you
Yeah.
know? And I'm just like, I don't want to sit down and watch a whole movie or a whole TV series or whatever.
So weird that you're saying that because my friends are always like, "Hey, do you want to get together and watch a movie?" And
No.
my friends who know me know that like I can't sit down to like I'm always doing stuff, and so it's like, man, that is like I can't even tell you how funny that is. I haven't owned a TV in 15 years, but people are always like, "Oh, have you seen this show?" I'm like, I don't watch TV, you know, and it's I think for the same reason, but yeah, I feel you on that. Like it's digestible, right? I mean, and pun on words, but it is like it's this thing where and I mean that was what sparked my eye, you know, with having you on the podcast was because it was like you break it down in such a way that it gives people this inspiration to carry with them, you know, and then they're in the gym and they're thinking about Danielle and how like amazing she is when she was doing this thing, or, you know, I'm really meal prepping and I'm thinking about, you know, all of these things. And I have people that follow me too that are like, I budgeted for the first time, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
we get to celebrate those wins. And I just, you know, when I've been in Orange Theory, I've thought of you several times, and I'm just like, because you post about being on the treadmill, and I'm like, yes, you know, this is like sharing openly about the self development journey, I think is so important because there's so much mainstream social media that like portrays this lifestyle and like perfection and I find that hard to connect with, you know. I think the relatability that you described is so attractive.
I agree, and I have felt the same way about you. We really are. We really do mirror each other in a lot of ways, and but I believe that. I believe we're attracted to people that we see ourselves in. You know, and
Definitely.
that's why when people are like, "You're so beautiful," I'm like, "I'm a reflection of you. You see yourself in me." You know,
Mm-hmm.
what a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I'm curious. So, like, uh, yeah, and I want to speak to, and I guess we're going back here to this mindset, this idea of like self love, and I know that kind of ties in with abundance. And I've always loved your perception of, I guess not so much like, well, and it's not specifically money, right? But like resources, right? You've always had this abundance mindset, and I remember like hearing you share about certain experiences and like things that come up for you where your level of trust and faith in something bigger than you is so comforting to me. And I'm curious, you know, how have you adopted this mindset of abundance in your health and wellness journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know why I've always just had this like unwavering faith I don't think I've ever really, I've always looked at it that way, but I have always kind of been a person where I'm like, it's going to work out. And honestly, I think part of that is like my avoidance, like there's a part of me that like my avoidance has worked out for me because I'm like, well, I'm not going to look at that. It's going to work out. Right. And it does, like the mind is a powerful thing. And so, and I'm not giving advice to any of your financial listeners. Like, don't
Right.
avoid anything financially. It's not going to just go away. You know what I mean? But that mindset of like,
Yeah.
I'm not hyper focusing in fear about this thing, right? And so on some level, my avoiding and not like perseverating on this is not calling that into my life. You know what I mean? Instead, I'm just like, oh, I'm just gonna live in the, look at the sunshine. It's so pretty or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so to answer your question, I think like the shift goes back to when I say I'm doing these things because I love myself and because they contribute to my life in a bigger way than what my body looks like, and all of that stuff will follow. Like that is the mentality, right? I'm saying I know that the results are going to come, right? I'm not worried about that. I'm not obsessively weighing myself. I'm not like doing any of these things. I'm just trusting the process and taking one step at a time and showing up for myself and knowing that the results are going to come.
Totally. Well, and I think too, I mean, I just think that's so beautiful because it's like when we dwell on the fear, our energy and our mind can be focused on the things that we actually have control over, And so what does that look like? Taking the action,
Mm-hmm.
going and making the list, going to the grocery store, like reading the label, whatever it is that is in the present moment rather than being at the store and worrying about how I'm going to pay for XYZ like next week or whatever, I mean, I think too, like you do a great job of setting the example for that. And it's definitely been a source of, yeah, like I said, comfort for me in my own journey with everything. And so I appreciate that so much about you. And um, I'm curious. So yeah, can you share a story of a time that where you were given something and it made an impact on your life, and
Mm-hmm.
were you given an opportunity to give that and pay it forward?
Yeah, such a great story actually. So when I came into the rooms, like when I decided to get sober, my life was a wreck. I didn't, at this point I didn't have anything, right? I had a roof over my head, but I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job. I didn't know how anything was going to play out. And again, I just kind of trusted the process, right? I knew I would be okay. I knew it would unfold. I don't know how or why, but I just had an inner knowing. And I rode the bus for 2 years. I worked at a restaurant. I was just trying to get back on my feet. I was going to school part time, and I worked with this woman who also took a couple of classes with me. She was in her early 20s. She was a bit younger than me at the time, but her family would come in to our restaurant, and I don't know what it was about Victoria, but she was like, I want you to meet my family. And she told her mom that I was in recovery, and that I rode the bus everywhere, and that was just something that was really impressive to her. And I didn't know this woman at all, and I got a call from her one day, and like I said, I met her like twice, and she said, I feel like God put it on my heart to get you a car. And I was like, wait, what? Like, what do because at this point, I had no idea how I was ever going to manage to get a car. I'm working at this restaurant, I'm doing my best, right? But that seemed so far fetched, but I kept putting one foot in front of the other. And even on the days where it felt like a big inconvenience to have to ride the bus and waste all this time, right? Like I just kept trusting. And it was really hard for me to accept a gift like that, with absolutely no strings attached. And this woman went out and she did her research and found a couple of cash cars, and picked me up from my apartment. And it was an obvious divine, you know, encounter. And she bought the car, she put the car in my title, or the title in my name, and she said, I just want you to keep doing what you're doing. And it was like this crazy ultimate gift of like, she's like, I see you, and I see, the impact that you're making around you, and I just, like, I just keep doing what you're doing. And like, just full circle too, like, I went to carry the message to this treatment center, and this was like 6 years later, maybe 7 years later. And I walk in, and lo and behold, that woman is there, right? And she's in treatment, and now she's trying to get sober. And it was just like this full circle of like, her seeing me in that moment was exactly what she needed, because she was about to leave treatment, and it was like God sent another lifeboat through me. And she was like, I can't believe you're here. And she's crying, and she's like, I was gonna leave today. And like, I, to answer your question about have I been able to give it back, I think on a spiritual level, that was like the greatest gift that I could ever offer this woman, was like
Hmm.
the opportunity to stick around and see what this life has to offer, right? Even if it sticks or doesn't stick, right? But I do know that God's going to put me in a position financially one day to be able to give back in that way too. I know it.
Mm.
I feel that in my heart and soul. But on a spiritual level, that was the greatest gift to be able to give back to someone, was that I've stayed sober, and she had a large part in that. My life changed when she got me that car. I was able to, my career shifted directions, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without a car. So
Oh, gosh.
grateful.
I like, for those listening, I've heard this story before, which is why I wanted to ask Danielle about it, because I just like the emotion that it evokes out of me. And I remember the day that you saw her, and I saw you that day right after, and you're like, I cannot believe what just, I like have goosebumps on like every inch of my body as I'm even talking about this. And like, it's been months since that experience, but I mean, it's just such a profound like sign that like there is something bigger,
Mhm.
that is working in all of our favor, and I think too, like, what a blessing. I hope that sharing that story inspires someone today. And I also, I think right now is a good time to cue like our Danielle and I have our friends, the Poplins, Kevin and Evelyn, or Kevlin, as my partner calls them. And they just suffered a horrible tragedy. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened and like share the story of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for doing this. I know that they were so appreciative. Like, our community has really just swooped in and taken care of them. And I mean, that's the essence of our life, right? That's the gift. But Evelyn has been a very monumental spiritual guide in my life for the last 9 or 10 years. And her and her husband and their baby just barely made it out of a traumatic house fire. Their entire house burnt down. They were asleep, and by the grace of God, Kevin woke up, and Evelyn's room was already on fire. They sleep in separate rooms, but um, her room was on fire, and he ran in there and was like, Evelyn, your room's on fire. And I mean, barely made it out within minutes. The story would have been different. And, there, I think it's important to note that there was a lithium battery plugged in for like some kind of like a lawnmower or something like that in their garage. And so, for anybody listening, if you have any battery packs charging, do not let them charge overnight. And that's what happened. It blew up, and yeah, the very tragic fire. So these are people who have lost everything, and they still continue to show up in the world with a positive attitude and good spirits. And if you have the ability to share or contribute to their GoFundMe, it would be so appreciated.
Yeah, and we're gonna link a QR code and the link to the GoFundMe, and again, yeah, sharing and contributing anything that you can give makes all the difference. And yeah, so my mom actually has them as students in her real estate classes and has known them for years. And so, when we made the connection that we all know one another, it was just wild, and that's how I met them. And it's just so tragic what's happened. And I do hope that they can rebuild their lives in a way that is more profound than ever before, but it's going to require some help. And so, yeah, like Danielle said, we just encourage anybody who has the ability to donate to the GoFundMe to help them get back on their feet right now. To please do so. And again, the link will be in the description of this episode. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Danielle, for coming on the podcast. I absolutely loved having you as a guest. You're a wonderful, easy person to talk to, first of all. I mean, I know that because we've been having conversations for years, but I just feel like there's so much valuable insight that you've offered. So thank you so much for coming and bearing your heart with us and sharing so openly.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. It's been a blast, and I love what you're doing. And like I said in the beginning, like, keep doing what you're doing. I know you're going to be successful. I know there's just nothing but good things lined up for you in the future. So I'm excited to see and watch it have a front seat, um, or front row seat to it.
Thank you. Yeah, and for those of you who want to follow Danielle's health and wellness journey, we will also link her social media in the description as well. So feel free to, get your meal prep ideas and like follow along there. And tuning in next week, I'm going to be hosting another dear friend of mine and business owner, Sohan Fan of the West China Tea Company. And we're going to be talking about Gong Fu Cha, which is a Chinese tea discipline, and what it's like to build an international business. And so I'll look forward to that and see you all next week.